So just how much of a raise are Sarasota County school teachers and staff getting? On Tuesday, the school board approved the agreement, which had been worked out with the Teachers Association in November. A 4% pay raise, retroactive to July of last year, will go to teachers, support staff, and bus drivers, cafeteria workers, and new teachers with a bachelor's degree will now get a starting salary of $42,000. Joining us for more on the pay raises is Bridget Ziegler of the Sarasota County School Board and Ron Thompson, the president of the Sarasota Republican Club. But we also want to know we did invite the school district and the Teachers Association to participate, but neither was available to provide a representative, and that is unfortunate. But Bridget, the school department, the school board has been on a long road because you were devastated during the Great Recession. What did it take to get back to this point where you could offer these 4% pay raises? Well,
I think everyone felt the downturn and felt the impact of it, but obviously rising property values have had a huge impact on our budget. And so over some course of time and quite frankly restructuring a lot of positions because we had to take away many. So that's what they were saying earlier. We still have felt the pinch because there's been a level of overburdened positions where they've taken on multiple roles in the past. So trying to make sure that we support our staff and show the value of them with the budget that we have, but still having to be very strategic at the same time.
Right, and just so people understand, property values are rising, so therefore revenues from property taxes are rising, which gives the district more flexibility.
Significantly more money in the last few years, so yes.
Okay. Rod, you don't have an issue with the teachers and staff getting this pay raise, especially considering all the prior pay raises were delayed because of the Great Recession. But do you have any reservation about how this is done?
I don't have a problem with pay raises. I don't have a problem with them catching up to where they should be. I think it's worth pointing out, still, despite the hole that Barry Dubin, my friend Barry Dubin, talked about needing to dig out from, I think Sarasota County teachers are still the highest paid in the state. Mm-hmm. So it's not like we're putting them in poverty or something. However, that being said, totally in favor of the 4% and what is needed to keep them highly competitive, because I think that does matter to a degree. But I do have a little bit of an issue with it being automatic. Everybody gets it because you've existed as a teacher another year. I think there really has to be some form of merit pay. Realize it's controversial. Realize the union doesn't like it. Realize it can be hard to implement. But I really think that is the best thing that can be done to improve teaching and to help in the classroom.
There's a lot to unpack there, and there's a difference between the merit pay for teachers, but also the professional staff and the bus drivers. And, you know, after we first reported the settlement back in November, I did get some emails from some staff, I don't know if they're teachers or just professional staff, some of whom say that they are caught in the middle. They are not at the top end of the scale. They're not the new teachers with that $42,000 a year salary. But some who are single parents make so little money that they still qualify for free lunches for their children and many other government programs. And they feel like here they are working in the school system, but they are still struggling mightily.
Well, you know, I hate hearing that because there's two parts of it. I think that it's unequivocal that everybody wants to pay our good teachers and our productive staff members as well as possible, because that's what creates a successful school district. And I don't think you'll find anyone on the street that wouldn't support that. And I think I'm very proud that Sarasota County is in the top of the state of our pay range. What's challenging is certainly that we have to be fiscally responsible with the money that we have. It's taxpayer money. We have to make sure that we allocate it properly and look at the resources that we have and that where the needs are. But in addition, we live in a county that is pricey to live in. I know that's a conversation that is talked about a lot, and so I feel that. And previously I used to work with small business owners, and I see that everyone felt the economic downturn, and so it's been a challenge for a lot of us.
Because keep in mind, and we did this story recently about the affordability of living around here, and we have police and firefighters and teachers who have to live often an hour away from Sarasota because they can't afford to live here.
Absolutely, and I think that's something, and certainly it's been a debate that keeps on going, is what Sarasota County can do for affordable living.
Now, I'm going to want to get more into this in the next block when we have more time, but Rod has the issues with the merit pay and the performance pay. Can you briefly describe how that works right now? Because as Dwayne said in his story, there are issues involving performance pay that is something that's in the
in
system
the moving
now.
forward. So you have the grandfather clause, and then you have, which are teachers that were in existence before 2011, and then you have the newer teachers who are on the performance-based clause, which makes for a very, I've never seen more of a complicated circumstance when it goes to any kind of compensation. But essentially you have highly effective and effective teachers that are applicable for these races. And I also share the same thought as I think a teacher is a teacher is a teacher is challenging. You want to support and compensate the most effective teachers as well as possible. I understand that formula is debatable, but trying to continue to work towards that, I think, is incredibly important because you want to incentivize people to work as hard as they can.
You know, Rod, the people who are watching this right now, there are going to be two schools of thoughts, and you could best be sure that I'm going to hear about both of them after this show. One would be the teachers who say you have no idea what they go through in some of these public schools.
Sure.
And then you have other people who will have anecdotal stories saying that there are teachers in the system who are no longer interested in teaching. They're there for the paycheck. And you know, Johnny and Jane come home with stories about not being able to get their grades in and so forth. It's a very difficult balance to strike between those teachers who are working their butts off and those teachers who may not be.
Right, because I think both of those are probably true. Both those anecdotes, both those sides. I think there are those that coasting along, and there are those that are working their butts off. There are those that work really, really hard in challenging schools to try and get the most out of students that often are coming not prepared. And you know, God bless those teachers to be able to do that. But that doesn't mean that we can't have some sort of a systemic way of rewarding the best teachers and weeding out the worst. I would love to know how many teachers out of thousands of teachers that Sarasota County has that they've gotten rid of based on performance, that they've been fired because they were lousy teachers. I think the number is close to zero. Well, we know in any profession you have a percentage of people that just don't perform. But we have no way of weeding those out and getting rid of them. That means they're still in there teaching our kids.
All right, there's a lot more to get to in this discussion coming up, along with a check on our forecast, so we'll be back in a moment. Welcome back. If you're just joining us, we are discussing the recent vote for pay raises for staff and faculty in the Sarasota County School District. And our guests tonight include School Board Member Bridget Ziegler and Rod Thompson, President of the Sarasota Republican Club. I heard your meeting the other night was just a little interesting.
It was, yes, indeed.
And at the heart of it is efforts by you and new member Eric Robinson to figure out per school, correct me if I'm wrong, how much in salary goes out in comparison to the actual budget and what that means, correct?
Well, I think to make it more simplistic, because I think if you watch the tape, the recording of the meeting, things got more convoluted. And so if you just take a step back and say, we have a budget, these are the budgeted items, let me know what the actual expenditures at the end of the year are, stop. At that point, we would utilize that as a tool to evaluate a little more further what that shows. There's been some speculation as to what that would show, and it would indicate that because certain teachers have been there longer or have certain education levels or on different steps, would essentially have higher pay, and typically, and this is all just a potential, because we haven't seen it, I don't want to say that's guaranteed to be the outcome, but there is speculation that that would show that there are disparities across the district.
Well, to the parent who is watching this right now, who cares? I mean, what does it mean?
Well, I think it means a lot, especially in the areas, again, speculatory, but if it did showcase what was alluded to at the board meeting and in some follow-up paper reporting, that certain areas that have the most need are not getting the most highly effective, well-trained, experienced teachers. And
so let's break it down from there. Let's say, you know, elementary schools or middle schools or high schools in low-income areas. Are they getting the best teachers?
I wouldn't say across the board,
or at least
yes
their
or no,
share of the teachers.
But my biggest thing is we have to look at our resources and look at where's the best place to put them to tackle our biggest problems. And there's a special, I mean, and I will say that not every single person can teach in all different environments. There's a formula, if you will. But we need to be willing to take starting with the data to use it as a tool to make those questions.
Rod, if you've been there the longest and you have longevity and have earned the right to pick where you're assigned to, you may not want to be in some of those schools that are may need you the most.
Right, and that's a problem because being there the longest shouldn't mean that you get to dictate where you work and what you do. Being there the longest doesn't make you the best either, although it may put you at the top of the pay scale. I mean, ask journalists and my friends in journalism for the past 20 years if being there the longest has saved them or not, and of course it hasn't. I think probably that schools should operate on the same idea. Look, Sarasota County has already decided, I think rightly so, that if you pay really top dollar, you get the best teachers. So I think all that Eric Robinson was trying to do was say, all right, X amount is budgeted for, say, the Booker schools. How much is actually spent? Because if it's different, if a lot less is spent, that means that you're getting teachers who are being paid less. If, according to the school district's concept, that paying more gets better teachers, that means you're not putting, generally speaking, as good teachers in those schools, and those are the very schools that need the best teachers. Pineview students don't always need the best teachers. Guess who gets the best teachers? So I think that's part of the thing you want to get to and see if that's the case. What really bothered me, Alan, is that 3 board members voted to say we don't want to even know what the numbers
are. My
are.
reading of it was that it's more complicated than just that equation.
That's why I said let's take a step back and look at exactly where I started. Don't get into the whole salary discussion and into the depths of that. At the end of the day, what on that budget sheet was listed? At the end of the year, how much did we spend? Stop. And then stop. And then if you want to add in all the additional caveats, certainly we can have that discussion, but as a very beginning starting point. But I want to go back to something that you'd said and something that I believe in, and I have heard other people mention this, but I think what we need to look at, especially at our poorly performing schools, is incentivizing teachers with bonuses to go there, and because the work environment is a little bit more
challenging. That was my next question, but I'll ask you a yes/no question right now. Is this a storyline that we're going to be hearing more about in the months to come?
I can certainly tell you, based on what was discussed on Tuesday, alarm bells went off for me because I was not aware that, one, he had even a challenge to even get these reports, and that, quite frankly, that they weren't able or willing to provide them, and then the fact that when it required a majority of the board to just ask for that, because that's that we need that information to be able to effectively do our job.
Well,
so, yes.
Is there a bureaucracy in effect here that prevents even school members to get the answers to those questions?
Yes.
Yeah, I think there is, and I think sometimes it's purposeful. I covered the Sarasota County School District when I was at the Herald Tribune for a number of years, and then I covered the FBFP formula making in Tallahassee when I was covering the legislature for the Herald Tribune and the New York Times Regional Group. And the problem is that twofold. One, nobody really knows how the FBFP works. It is incredibly complicated. That's one problem. But number 2 is every time they didn't want to give me an answer, they started showing how complicated it was, how difficult it is. Well, we can't because it's just too complicated. I feel like in this case, if they can't tell us where the money is going, they need to change how they do it.
That's true in just about every state and federal agency, that they can tie you into knots by telling you how complicated it is.
And that's a problem, I think.
Then we need to make it more simplistic.
The other area I want to get to is when you talk about merit pay, how much of that is controlled by the county school board and state statute?
Well, there's statutory, there's areas that it's tied to statute, but we have some fluctuation, I believe, outside the contract, that we would be able to potentially add to the merit pay. I think it's the contract that initially holds our hands. So if I'll bring up an example, Best and Brightest, very controversial, but if you get to the heart of kind of what it was intended to do, is obviously it's no secret we're having a hard time recruiting teachers in going into the education field. So the intent was to start off with an early bonus. I'm not going to go into how it's currently being implemented because I don't think it's achieving what it was meant to do, but what the Coalition of School Board members have suggested is to utilize that scholarship money to incentivize teachers, highly effective teachers, to go to poorly performing
what
schools.
I'm getting at is that, especially when Jeb Bush was governor, we moved towards a system where merit pay would be given out by virtue of test scores and how the test scores are doing, which resulted in a lot of teachers and students and the parents, like moi, complaining that teachers are too often teaching to the test. I could tell you, my kids said that at a certain point during the school year, teachers stopped teaching and started teaching to the test. And kids stop learning.
So I think that's a problem. I think everybody's recognized that, like even FCAT and whatnot, that there's been a problem there of teaching to the test. If the test is right, there's some value in that, but you don't want to really be teaching just to the test. I go back to, my mom was a teacher for 30-some years, and back in the old days. But principals always know who the good teachers are and who the bad teachers are, who the average teachers are. They know who's coasting, they know who's giving 110%. My mom would always say the principal would always be able to tell you, they can rank them in the school and pretty much everybody's going to agree. I just wonder if maybe we need to look at giving individual principals more autonomy in dealing out that sort of thing. I realize there'd be politics, there's always going to be imperfections in the system, but if maybe that could be part of the system.
Well, I mean, but there are also issues, and there are so many great principals out there, but there are principals who are on the job more than others.
No, absolutely. I agree with autonomy. I think that you want to get the strongest leaders in your individual schools and let them lead. And the less red tape and bureaucracy they have to deal with, and they can focus on your students and really get down into what needs to be done, the less bureaucracy is there, the better outcomes I believe will happen. And I think there are some pilot programs around the state.
All right. We have to take another quick break, but when we return, we'll have final thoughts from our guests, plus what some of our viewers are saying about an increase in the use of the Baker Act. Stay with us. Welcome back. What kind of impact will raises have on Sarasota's school district? Our guests join us now for final thoughts. Bridget, the union passed this agreement overwhelmingly, but still obviously there are some people out there who wish more could have been done. What do you want them to have as a takeaway here?
Well, I want them, and I want everyone to know how important this district is to the county and how much we want to work together to make it the best place for our students to go and to attract the best teachers and staff. I recognize that there are a lot of variables outside of our control when we deal with contract negotiations and funding, especially the cost of living, and it pains me to hear that, but I'm very proud of what we have going on here, and I think that we need to keep it up to bring in, again, to retain those teachers and bring in the best teachers.
And is this only the start of getting teachers and staff up to what they should be?
Yes, that's true, and I want to caution with that because I do think that's very important, but I think that as coming from the private sector, I think there are a lot of people who are still feeling the pain and have not experienced any kind of pay raise. So I'm very pleased that we're able to offer this, but I think people need to put that in perspective.
Rods, what is your takeaway?
Yeah, well, same thing. I don't think that we can look at paying like we did when there was a runaway property value increase and the school district just kept spending like drunken sailors out there, the extra tax and everything. I don't think we want to go back to those days. I think that there's at least some voices for fiscal restraint on the school board. I think that's important. I'd also like to see this whole debate that we were talking about in the previous segment really be a push for more transparency by the school board and the school district. I think that the district has continually lacked transparency and makes it very difficult for journalists, for citizens, and it turns out even now for school board members to get information. For a school board member to have to maybe file a public records request, that's outlandish.
New year, new superintendent coming in, new school board. Maybe there will be new rules. I heard that on another show. Before we go, we want to share with you what some of our viewers are saying about last night's topic, the Baker Act. In the past 5 years, the number of involuntary examinations performed under the Act has increased by 70% in Sarasota. That increase also applies to minors. We asked you what you think about the effectiveness of the Baker Act. Tammy Bucher writes, these people in the school system don't have any idea what they are doing. They are so worried about being sued that instead of dealing with children, they just call the police and Baker Act them. Alice Kadaratz writes, the Baker Act is a great tool when used properly. Unfortunately, with mandatory insurance, children are being locked up needlessly. And Stephanie Alexander writes, wow, I am so glad to see this. My 5-year-old was Baker Acted, and even the doctor said it was ridiculous. He is a baby, and the schools don't want to do their job, which is to deal with kids. If you'd like to join the conversation about tonight's topic, just visit our Facebook page at facebook.com/news@7. And FYI, want to watch past Roundtable discussions? They're available on Apple TV, Amazon Fire, and Roku. Thank you to our guests for being here tonight. Bridget Ziegler is on the Sarasota County School Board. Rod Thompson is president of the Sarasota Republican Club.